It's the night before a new week begins. Maybe you're staring at your calendar, already counting the meetings and deadlines stacked ahead. Maybe you're scrolling, trying to distract yourself from the unease building in your chest. Or maybe you're lying in bed, telling yourself that tomorrow you'll be better, stronger, sharper, that this time you'll start the week right. But then comes the heaviness, the doubt, that whisper in your head. What if I can't keep up? What if I don't have the energy? What if I fall behind before I even begin? And suddenly, Monday feels less like a fresh start and more like a test you're not prepared for. We tell ourselves we need to begin with power, that if we don't start strong, we've already failed. But the truth is, you don't have to begin the week as your strongest self. You don't need to carry all the answers, all the confidence, all the momentum right away. You just need to begin. Think of the smallest seeds, barely visible between your fingers. They don't burst out of the soil in a single day. They don't arrive tall and blooming. They begin as whispers of life, fragile and quiet, slowly breaking open underground where no one can see. That hidden beginning doesn't look strong, but it is still a beginning. And over time, it becomes something more. This is how our weeks work too. You don't need to wake up Monday morning overflowing with discipline or determination. You just need to place one foot in front of the other, to write one email, to take one breath, to try even if it's imperfect, especially if it's imperfect. Psychologists call this the activation energy principle. The hardest part of any task is not the task itself, but the small energy it takes to overcome inertia, to move from nothing to something. Once you've started, momentum carries you further. But we make the mistake of trying to leap straight into strength, expecting perfection from the very first step. And when we can't meet that expectation, we freeze. The secret isn't to demand strength at the start. It's to lower the barrier so starting feels possible. So as you look toward the week ahead, ask yourself, what's the smallest first step I can take? Not the biggest, not the most impressive, just the smallest. Because that is enough to begin. We rarely talk about how beginnings actually feel. They don't feel triumphant. They feel clumsy, awkward, even discouraging. Think about the first time you tried anything new, a sport, a language, a skill. You probably stumbled. You probably felt slow, behind, unsure. But that stumbling was not weakness. It was proof you were moving. Strength doesn't live at the start. Strength grows along the way. And yet, we live in a culture that glorifies strength at the beginning. The strong start, the perfect morning routine, the flawless launch. But the truth behind every story of success is much messier. Writers begin with terrible first drafts. Athletes begin with shaky steps. Leaders begin with doubt. What makes them succeed is not the So tomorrow, when you wake, don't ask yourself to be perfect. Don't measure your worth by how powerfully you begin. Instead, remind yourself, I don't have to start strong, I just have to start. That is the only requirement. And as the hours unfold, notice how that small permission changes things. Notice how the pressure lifts when you no longer demand excellence from the very first breath. Notice how momentum begins to build, not from force, but from presence. Because the truth is, you've already proven you can do this. Every week you've lived, every day you've survived, began with a step that probably didn't feel strong. Yet here you are, still moving, still beginning again. And that is what matters. So as you stand at the edge of the week ahead, take a deep breath. Don't carry the weight of perfection with you. Don't force yourself into strength. Just step. However small, however uncertain, that step is enough. And once you've taken it, you'll discover something quietly beautiful. Beginnings don't have to roar. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they tremble, but they still count. They still carry you forward. You don't have to start strong, you just have to start. The morning comes, and maybe it feels heavier than you hoped. You open your eyes and the weight of the day presses in before your feet even touch the ground. You wanted to rise with clarity, with fire, with strength. But instead you feel slow, maybe even reluctant, and that's okay. You don't have to leap out of bed ready to conquer the week. You just have to rise. Even if it takes longer than you wish. Even if you carry a tiredness you can't quite shake. Rising itself is a beginning. So you make the small motions that signal life moving forward. You brush your teeth. You pour the coffee. You answer one message even if others wait. These aren't acts of triumph. They're acts of presence. And that is where real beginnings live. In the small, ordinary steps that don't look strong but keep you moving. There's a myth that motivation must precede action, that you need to feel inspired before you can begin. But science tells a different story. Action often precedes motivation. It is not the strong start that makes us move. It is movement that makes us strong. Psychologists call this the behavioral activation principle. When you take even the smallest action, your brain interprets it as progress, and that sense of progress generates more energy. A short walk leads to more steps. Writing one sentence leads to a page. Folding one shirt leads to a drawer. The power was never in waiting to feel strong. It was always in starting small. Think about a snowball rolling down a hill. At the top, it looks insignificant, fragile, like it might break apart with the lightest touch. But once it begins to roll, once it gathers momentum, it grows larger, faster, unstoppable. You are not meant to be the avalanche at the beginning. You are meant to be the snowball, small and trembling, but in motion. So when the week begins and you feel yourself doubting, lower the bar. Not to make yourself lazy, but to make beginning possible. Instead of telling yourself you need to finish the whole task, tell yourself to start for 5 minutes. Instead of demanding that you work out for an hour, just put on your shoes. Instead of forcing yourself to clean the whole house, choose one corner. The smallest start is enough to break inertia. And once you've broken it, the momentum will carry you further than you thought possible. Of course, there will be days when even the smallest start feels impossible. Days when your body resists, when your mind floods with reasons to wait. On those days, remember, beginning is not always glamorous. Sometimes beginning is dragging yourself out of bed even when you don't feel ready. Sometimes it's opening your laptop with no words in your head. Sometimes it's showing up messy, uncertain, not at your best. But that's still a start. And the courage to begin messy is often greater than the ability to begin strong. We don't celebrate messy beginnings enough. We only see the polished outcomes, the books published, the businesses launched, the athletes at their peak. But hidden behind every polished outcome are countless mornings of doubt, countless starts that looked weak, countless days when the only victory was that they began at all. That's the story we forget to tell, but it's the story that matters most. So as you step into this week, give yourself permission to begin imperfectly, to stumble, to take small, shaky steps. Don't despise them. They are not signs of failure, they are signs of courage. Because anyone can start when they feel strong, but starting when you feel fragile, that is where strength is born. And here's something else worth remembering. The week ahead doesn't need you to carry it all at once. It only needs you to carry this day. And this day doesn't need you to carry it all at once either. It only needs you to carry this moment. Break it down, piece by piece. Start where you are, with what you have. That is enough. When you feel overwhelmed, pause and breathe. Tell yourself, I don't need to finish everything today. I only need to begin. And beginning, however small, is already a victory. Let that thought soften the pressure in your chest. Let it loosen the grip of perfectionism. Let it remind you that you are not running a race that must be won in the first lap. You are simply moving, step by step, into the life you are building. And as you do, notice how beginnings multiply. One small start creates space for another. One gentle motion opens the door to the next. Before you know it, the day that felt too heavy to carry becomes lighter, not because you conquered it with strength, but because you honored it with presence. So don't wait to feel ready. Don't demand strength before you begin. Just begin, however small, however imperfect, and trust that the strength will follow, as it always does, in the movement itself. By the time the week is in motion, the pressure to keep up can feel even heavier than the pressure to begin. Monday passes, and maybe you didn't accomplish everything you wanted. Tuesday arrives, and you already feel behind. The temptation is to quit, to think, if I didn't start strong, it's too late now. But here's the truth. Beginnings don't only exist at the start of the week. You can begin again at any moment. That's the gift we often forget. Each hour is a chance to reset. Each breath is a chance to choose differently. You don't need to wait for another Monday to start over. You can start again on a Wednesday afternoon. You can start again tonight before bed. You can start again in the middle of a conversation, in the middle of a task, in the middle of a mistake. Strength doesn't come from never faltering. It comes from the willingness to begin again over and over, no matter how many times you've stumbled. Think of a child learning to walk. They fall more than they take steps. But no one calls that failure. No one says they should quit because they didn't start strong. Every fall is part of the learning. Every stumble is proof that they are moving. And slowly, through repetition, through persistence, their legs grow stronger. It is the same with us. Life doesn't ask you to rise without ever falling. It asks you to rise again and again and again. Neuroscience supports this truth. When you repeat an action, even if you fail at it, the neurons in your brain build stronger connections. This process, called neuroplasticity, is how habits are formed. The brain doesn't demand perfection, it demands persistence. The very act of starting again and again literally rewires your brain toward growth, which means that every time you give yourself permission to begin, even if it looks messy, you are teaching your brain resilience. You are building the muscle of becoming. So as the week unfolds and you notice yourself faltering, resist the urge to label it as failure. Instead, whisper to yourself, this is another chance to begin. Not with force, not with shame, simply with presence. That shift in perspective can transform the weight of the week into something softer, something you can hold. And slowly, you will notice that the week feels different. Not easier, not lighter, but more possible. Because possibility doesn't live in perfection, it lives in presence. And presence begins with the willingness to start. So whether you are standing at the threshold of Monday or somewhere in the middle of the week, know this: you haven't missed your chance. You haven't failed. You are always allowed to begin again. And each time you do, you prove to yourself that strength was never about the start. It was always about the return. And now, as the week stretches ahead, you might still feel a quiet nervousness in your chest. Maybe you worry about falling short. Maybe you worry about losing momentum. Maybe you fear that starting small won't be enough to carry you where you want to go. Those doubts are natural. They are part of being human. But here is something worth remembering. Strength is not what makes you start. It is what grows because you did. Think about the times in your life when you achieved something you once thought impossible. At the beginning, you were unsure. You didn't know if you could handle it. And yet, step by step, you moved forward. Looking back, the strength feels obvious. But at the time, it didn't feel like strength at all. It felt like small actions, shaky choices, hesitant attempts. And that's the paradox. Strength is rarely visible at the start. It becomes visible only in hindsight, when you realize that every small beginning added up to something greater than you imagined. This is why you don't need to pressure yourself to start strong, because the strength you're demanding is the strength that will only exist later, after you've begun. It's like asking a seed to be a tree before it's planted. The seed cannot display its strength in the soil, but that doesn't mean it is weak. It simply hasn't grown yet. You are the same. The beginning of the week may not show your strength, but that doesn't mean it isn't there, waiting to emerge. So instead of demanding strength, give yourself space. Space to grow into what you need. Space to stumble without shame. Space to rest when the weight feels heavy. This is not laziness. This is wisdom. Because growth requires space just as much as effort. And when you do rest, when you step back, when you pause, you are not erasing your progress. You are nourishing it. Muscles don't grow during the workout. They grow in the rest afterward. Creativity doesn't bloom during the hustle. It blooms in the quiet when ideas have room to breathe. Even the earth itself needs seasons of stillness, winters that look barren but are preparing the ground for spring. You too need these pauses. Starting is important, continuing is important, but so is resting. Strength is built in all three. As you carry yourself through the coming days, notice how often you compare yourself to others. Notice how quickly you feel behind when you see someone else beginning loudly, confidently, with energy you don't have. And when you notice it, gently remind yourself, their beginning is not your beginning. Their pace is not your pace. Just because they start strong doesn't mean you have to. What matters is that you start at all. Comparison steals the beauty of your own rhythm. You were never meant to live someone else's timeline. You were meant to honor your own. And your own may be slower, quieter, softer, and that is still enough. Because beginnings do not need to be grand to matter. They only need to be yours. So here you are, standing at the edge of the week. Maybe you feel ready, maybe you don't. Maybe you're brimming with energy, maybe you're dragging yourself forward. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you begin. Begin where you are with what you have, and trust that everything else will grow along the way. Take one last deep breath with me now. Inhale the possibility of this week. Exhale the pressure to perfect it before it begins. Inhale the courage to start small. Exhale the demand to start strong. Feel the way your chest rises and falls, proof that you are already in motion, proof that life itself is carrying you forward, whether you feel ready or not. When you wake tomorrow, remember this moment. Remember that beginnings don't have to roar. They can whisper, they can tremble, they can falter, but they still count. And one day, you will look back and realize that this quiet beginning, this imperfect step, was enough to shape the week ahead in ways you could not yet see. So as you enter the days waiting for you, hold this truth close. You don't have to start strong. You just have to start. And that is more than enough.